quiet courtroom sat a young man old in years. A cheerful smile played on his face. His eyes were filled with tears. As in that crowd he sat alone.
A few weeks ago, I found out about this website called Unsplash. It is a site where users can upload high-resolution images, and they give a Creative Commons Zero release to all of these pictures, which means these images can be used for commercial, non-commercial reasons. They can be used for anything at all, for free. And the end user doesn't even have to credit the photographer. No attribution required. Asterisk, but appreciated. So my blood pressure rose. I am a commercial photographer. I understand the value of an image. I also understand the cost associated with making an image. And here come thousands and thousands of photographers uploading their work in high resolution, ready to go print form for anyone to use for any reason at all. And I was floored. I thought, this is the dumbest shit I have seen in so long. So I took it to Facebook and I posted on my Facebook page. I was like, what do you guys think? On my personal page. Well, that garnered 200 comments just on my personal page. So then I put it over on my business page, and again, the comments came rushing in, both pro and con. And I very much am in the con camp at this point. So my friend Ron Dawson was like, look, the cat is out of the bag. This is the new thing. Who moved my cheese? Blah, 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 blah. You know, are you going to bitch and moan and complain about it, or are you going to do something about it? You can get online and just complain, but that's not going to change this. I also know how very easy it is to become the old man yelling at the kids to get off my lawn, that things change, things evolve. There's going to be new ways of doing things. I don't understand the race to the bottom of free. How do you monetize free? But Ron kind of challenged me, and Ron pushed me. And I was like, you know, Ron, you're right. I can't just sit here and bitch and moan and complain. I want to look at this from all sides. So I reached out to one of the founders of Unsplash, Mikael Cho. I sent Mikael a fairly lengthy email telling him who I was, letting him know that I'm really not that big of a fan of his website and their ethos and their mission statement. And I've spent the last 2 weeks diving deep, researching this company, researching the beginnings of it, and reaching out to photographers who use this platform. Mikael was very gracious and agreed to do a Skype interview, debate, something, let me talk at him, something. And this video is that discussion that Mikael and I had. At the end of this discussion, I'll have a few final thoughts, and then I'll have a follow-up video coming up in a few days of just my overall thoughts about Unsplash and this new future that we live in. So here's that discussion, and again, a very big grateful thank you goes to Mikael for taking the time to speak with me. I know that there are a lot of people who send you a lot of nasty thoughts through all the different channels on the internet, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. So first of all, Mikael, I just want to thank you for taking the time. I sent you an email yesterday, and I think I was pretty forward in my thoughts on how I, as a photographer, can see Unsplash as being a detriment to the industry that I work in. Mm-hmm. And I've worked in this industry for 20 years. And as I said in the email, I've seen two major sea changes, from film to digital. And then once hobbyists and amateurs had access to digital, started taking a lot more pictures and found out that they could make $200 shooting a wedding on a weekend. They thought, right, oh, this is great. I made $200. Where the wedding photographer was now competing with the amateur, right?
Right.
And I mean, I've read all of your Medium posts. I've watched all your presentations, and like I don't even know where to start. My desk is covered in notes that I have about this, and I guess the thing I want to start with is what I see as a liability for you with Unsplash and for the photographers that are contributing to that. So as a commercial photographer, I understand, you know, the traditional licensing methods, but I also understand things like model releases, property releases, trademark releases, things like that. I understand the laws of what you can use and what you can't use. And it was pretty clear that Unsplash is a large community of hobbyists, amateurs, and there are professionals alike. I've actually been spending 2 weeks diving deep into this. I sometimes get really focused on stuff, and I dive deep. So what I wanted to do was as a commercial photographer, understanding the liability of not having releases. I kind of got with a crew of other creatives that are in my network, and we started reaching out to photographers on Unsplash. And we basically came up with this fake campaign. It was a commercial campaign, and we were needing a model release. Hey, we found your photo on Unsplash, and we would like to use that for a commercial purpose. Can we get a copy of the model release from the person? And we spread our net far and wide. US, Canada, UK, Brazil, South Africa, all over the world. We started contacting photographers, asking for a model release for the commercial use of the picture. Not a single photographer could get back to us with a release ready to go. Several photographers said, well, it's on Unsplash and it's covered under their license, so that means it's already released. And then we would have to write back and say, it's not released. You are releasing the copyright for us to use the photo, but the person in the photo needs to actually sign a release for commercial purposes. And many people just didn't understand that. They didn't understand what a release meant. Many people said, well, I'll have to find one. I don't know where to get a release. So we sent them a release. And then we got releases back like this. I reached out to a photographer, and it was a picture of 2 children in the picture. So we're like, hey, we would like to use this for a campaign. We need a model release. We sent him a release because he didn't have one. And then where you put the subject's name, he just filled it out with brother's pick.
Right.
It was a picture of 2 brother's pick, and sent it back.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we got back. We had someone else. We asked for a release. We sent them a release, attached it to the email. They forwarded it to the subject. The subject filled it out, signed it, and sent it back. The subject was 16 years old, and so is a minor, and therefore cannot sign the release themselves. So I go to your license on the Unsplash site, and it says that Unsplash grants you an irrevocable, non-exclusive copyright license to download, copy, modify, distribute, perform, and use photos from Unsplash for free, including for commercial purposes. And what we found with contacting dozens and dozens and dozens of photographers is a massive liability, not only for Unsplash, because Unsplash is granting the license.
Mm-hmm.
The legality of what your license says is that you, Unsplash, grants this license. And photographers don't understand. They don't understand what the model release is. I understand that each picture that's submitted to Unsplash is seen by human eyes and is either approved to be on the platform or not approved.
Right.
There is no contract that requires the photographer to sign off saying every picture that I upload is released. I have the property release, I have the model release, I have the trademark release. If you go to Unsplash and you type in Coca-Cola in the search term, a bunch of Coca-Cola pictures pop up. Those cannot be licensed for commercial use unless you have a trademark release from the Coca-Cola company. And I mean, does Unsplash have a trademark release? Can you go to a filing cabinet and pull out saying, yep, here's where Coca-Cola has released these pictures to us to license?
Right. Yeah, so I understand these liabilities that are there. And you're right. There's work that we can do on the submission process in terms of education around those things. We've built up a help section that's starting with that, and there's some elements in the submission process that can be more clear. What we're trying to do is, you're right, there's things that we can clarify in there, especially for like riskier pictures, especially when there are people involved, those sorts of things. We're trying to start with those. But yeah, there's an education process that is even kind of 2 steps or even 3 steps back, because a lot of people who are submitting images, as you know, don't even come from a basic licensing background of even understanding what the basis of licensing is in the first place. So what we're trying to do is go backwards into both of those and cover sort of at a high level, the licensing and where it all came from, and then here's how it breaks down into different categories. But we want to do that in a really usable way so that people don't see it like a long terms and conditions thing, which people will just kind of glaze over and submit the images anyway. So we're trying to get there. And I know that we're not as best as we can be right now, but some of the things that we're trying to do are in that submission process, including a human on our side, trying our best. If there is something that happens, we get involved and try to help anybody in the contributor or the person who used the image, whatever it is. So I get that that's there. And I think at a high level, like you mentioned, where to start. And I appreciate your email, because you told me sort of your whole background, and I understand all those things. And what I think is, like, we all come from different backgrounds, and I understand, like, it's very difficult for me to know that whole history because I didn't live that history. So I'm totally open to that. When you're coming from another background, I want to understand that. Like, that's part of the responsibility that we feel. And I know we made the site, just to be useful and whatever it is, but it can become something that ends up changing an industry. And I'm not going to say, what other tech companies might say sometimes when they're like, oh yeah, this is, the great, this is this. I get that it's fundamentally changing how the existing model works. And that's not great necessarily for everybody, and how it works. So I understand that. I'm not going to try to say that it's great for everyone. It's obviously not that great, especially for people who have, let's say, the bulk of their photography revenue was coming from licensing. That's definitely not great for that. But I think that there's an evolution, and that's part of it as well. And the way that I'm looking at it as, there's a net positive result that I think is happening as a whole. And we haven't even, monetized ourselves, right? So the site today was a spin out, from Crew, as you know, from the background. And we know that we had all this growth, but a lot of what we've been doing for the last 6 months and what we'll be doing for the next year is figuring out the business model that has to go with this in order for the site to continue to live, and in order for the contributors who are involved to really benefit for the long run. Because we know, for example, that 80% of our contributors, they do want to actually be hired for work, which basically means make money from their photography. And so for us, I want to be involved in that. It's actually our responsibility I understand that this is shifting, and I know we haven't done anything today, so it looks like we're not trying to do anything, but we haven't even done anything for our own business either from a revenue perspective yet.
Right. I get the revenue. I mean, the thing I take issue with is coming from one of your Medium posts. It says Unsplash was made shortly after Crew as a way to help Crew grow.
Yep.
And it did just that. Unsplash referred more customers to Crew than any other source. It helped us survive where we were months from going out of business. Without Unsplash, there likely would be no Crew.
Right.
And since then, Crew grew into a multi-million-dollar business supporting companies and creators across 30 countries. There was, in the first 5 months of Unsplash starting, it brought in nearly $1 million to Crew.
Right.
And in 2.5 years, you were approaching $30 million. This comes from a video that you gave at some sort of design or develop conference. And there are a couple knives in my chest. And again, I just want to tell you I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate your willingness to hear us out, because I realize you probably get, a lot of negative stuff, and you probably get shit on Twitter and direct messages. I get it. I do too. And Unsplash fans are going to hit me and call me all sorts of names for doing this, but that's okay. But you quoted a member of Crew in that presentation you gave. It says, "Crew changed the way I work, and with that, how I live. It's bigger than a piece of software. It's actually impacting people's livelihood. It's how they make money." And for me, I think of negative asymmetry. Valentin Minguez quoted on my Facebook, "Would this be a case of negative asymmetry? We photographers will lose more than we can win uploading our photos, and Unsplash will win more than they can lose." So Crew became $1 million company off the backs of people giving you free pictures with nothing to go back to the photographers. Like the photographers who submitted to Unsplash did not get a piece of that $30 million pie. Crew got a piece of the $30 million pie. But it's, to me, it feels predatory that if we can convince enough people to give their stuff away for free, we'll be able to go over here and make millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that argument. That's not what we did. Like, legitimately what we posted on the site, we put it up, we started with our own images. We were going to post more images ourselves. That traffic was built from images that we had, and we felt that there wasn't going to be enough dollar value attached to our images. It was better to have people who knew about Unsplash and then maybe would find out about Crew.
But can you see where those 10 images brought the company, $30 million in revenue? And I realize that's gross, that's not net. So I'm not saying that there were $30 million sitting in your front pocket. I understand numbers to some extent, not much. But those 10 images that Alejandro shot for you.
Yes.
And this is that one more knife from another quote. "Around this time, we were creating the homepage of our website. While searching for a photo to use, we noticed every photography option was either too crappy, too expensive, or both. Instead, we hired a photographer."
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the thing. Like, hey, we can't find what we need. We'll hire someone.
Mm-hmm.
And then you used one of those pictures. You had about 10 left over. So you decided, let's give these away for free. These are pictures that someone else created for you. They weren't your pictures. So I call Alejandro patient zero. I got in touch with him. And the thing I wanted to know was, like, did you ask permission to upload these photos.
Yep.
And yes, you did. So, like, I appreciate that very much, that you asking the photographer. But this is what Alejandro came back and said. Of course they did, and it was part of the experiment. The pics had little issues, I think he may mean value, and were not much use to me. So they were perfect for this. And I agree with you. At the end, it's not good business for any photographer. It's like cannibalism. But it is good for the platform, the industry of ego. And, you know, those 10 images were free, and you paid Alejandro X number of dollars, but we can go back and see where those seeds that were planted created more seeds and created more seeds, and more seeds that really helped Crew take off, but at the cost of other people who I know willingly gave their pictures. I know you haven't stolen pictures or anything like that. But where I feel that it is, well, let me just pause for comment from you.
Yeah, I think it can be seen as a cost to other people, but people uploaded not for that reason. Like, we weren't trying. It was very clear. You know, we made Unsplash. It said "made by Crew" on the site. We were also giving credit to the photographers whenever they would upload those images. So it was the same. In our mind, I understand. Like, we're sitting above that on the credit level, right? Because Unsplash.com, when you would hit the site in the beginning, it said what it was, and it said "made by Crew" there, and then under each photo, it said the contributor. So yeah, you might see Crew before you would see one of the photographers' names. All of those were direct links out to the photographers. And it was the same philosophy. So we said, well, let's just share in all of this. You know, people are finding out about Crew, so let's help, you know, whoever's contributing to this, whatever they're doing, let's help people find out about them.
Right.
That was the same ethos around it. So for them, that was the benefit, not necessarily, and it may have turned into money. You know, we didn't try to step involved in those cuts or whatever it was.
Right.
And we met some of those. There was only 360 photos in that first year, and we met a bunch of those photographers who, some of them were hobbyists, some of them were amateurs, and they were booking gigs because people would find their work on Unsplash.
Right.
And I know that's not everybody, but I do believe in the future, and this is the whole purpose of Crew. Yeah, I was an independent designer. We created these sites to create value and try to solve some of the problems in those spaces. Photography, I believe all those creative industries, they're evolving. They're just evolving in different ways at different paces. And there's different solutions and platforms that can be built at different times that might work. And so Crew and design and development was at sort of that stage, and we felt that we understood that problem really well to try and come and fix it. Photography, we kind of understood it from the usage side, less so from being photographers, but more so on the other side of it. But we still understood the value of someone who creates something. You know, my background as well, I'm writing, and you've read a bunch of my stuff. Mm-hmm. I understand that right now, I would rather 10 times more people see what I wrote than be paid for it. So even when Medium, they contacted me, they said they're doing contributions and I can be paid for it. And I know it's because it's different, right? I don't make a living that way. I have never made a living that way, so I feel different about it. Right. But I still don't feel it's a cost to me. Like, if Medium makes money and they make money in another way or whatever, and I'm writing there for free, I still don't expect to be paid for it. My benefit from Medium is that people see my writing and are impacted by that art. And there's a lot of people, that's the purpose of Unsplash. And I get that it led to things for Crew, but it did lead to things for other photographers. The gains may be different, and it may have, whatever it is, but that's just how it happened. And when we created the site, we tried to do the best that we could to be giving that same level back to the people that were involved.
And I get that. I get that. I mean, even I, in my cranky old man, get off my lawn, Unsplash sort of reaction I've had to step back and say, well, shit, look at all those numbers. Look at all those links people are getting. Look at all the views. Look at all the stuff. Well, hell, maybe I need to get on it. Maybe I need to contribute. But but it's I'm okay writing for someone for free, but then imagine a $900 billion company taking all of your writings, compiling them together, using it for their marketing campaign, and not giving you a dime. Like, yes, I'm doing this for Medium, but then Apple comes along, takes everything I wrote or everything I made and uses it for free without any credit, without any payment. And that's where I take issue with the commercial license. Is that Unsplash is billing itself as this community of you say it's the world's most generous photographers. It's a community. It's generous. It's about giving back. It's about inspiration. When in reality, people are just sucking good content. Like, there's really good photography on Unsplash, sucking it and using it for all sorts of commercial purposes that the photographer gets nothing for other than some like warm fuzzies. And where it hurts is, my friend TJ said it best somewhere. Like I said, I have 8,000 pages around here. That it's what did I do with TJ's quote? I'll find it later. But when I posted about this on Facebook, like, hey, what the hell is this site? What are people thinking? Annie came in and commented. She's one of your community managers.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm a non-professional photographer who's been sharing my photos for 4 years. And later she says, I often see people talking about how the industry is changing. And, that's part of this is here come people who are not part of this industry, who don't understand what we do. Like I said, it's an ecosystem like a forest, how I see it in my email to you, and taking trees, and you have investment money behind you. I mean, when you split Unsplash with Crew, you still had $5 million in the bank. You were running 2 separate companies at that point, and you still had $5 million to work on. And Crew was almost profitable. I mean, one of my questions is why the hell did you sell Unsplash, which is costing you so much money, and keep Crew? Because Crew is about to make money. What the hell are you doing? What's wrong with you? And you have no way to monetize free. How do you monetize free? But another issue I take is someone reached out to me and said, hey, Annie and someone named Andrew emailed me.
Yeah.
And they said, this is Annie and Andrew. We manage the community team at Unsplash while also being bloggers and freelance photographers. But Annie just told me that she's a non-professional photographer. We were browsing your Instagram feed, and we'd really love the vibe of your photography. We were wondering if you wanted to join our community of photographers dedicated to spreading the impact. We only feature the highest quality photos. Photographers using Unsplash often talk about the desire to contribute or give back to this special community. Give back to people who are taking it for free and not paying anyone a dime. That is not charity.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the people, I get what you're saying. I mean,
it's not charity.
People are giving to this. It's a net positive is what they're looking for. So I get that there's going to be commercial people who are going to use this, right? There's going to be commercial people who are going to use it in certain ways. Honestly, I never expected those ways. I was like, okay, people who are creating and designing things that want to make something original, we're going to offer the high-res photo, and then I, as a designer myself, I'm not going to try to take that photo, put it verbatim into my thing. I'm probably going to size it and take a corner so I can use that nice, sunset filter that somebody had over in the corner and make that my design part. I get that people are going to use that. People who have different tastes and whatever, they just take the full image and put it in there and whatever it is. And sometimes they don't give credit. But there's a huge amount of people who do. And there's a deep psychology that just goes with that. We all have a reciprocity principle that's built into us. And what we've seen is when you remove the license, when you make it easy for people to use the image, when people don't expect to have that high of a quality of image to be able to use, they do something in return. So we get 40% of the images are being credited. We encourage that credit. It's not
Only
forced on people.
40%, so less than half get even a credit.
Yes, but the thing is, we wouldn't have the volume of distribution if it wasn't so clear that you could use these images. One of the challenges that we dealt with was, if you add a commercial license or personal license, or we start going down the license route, you end up in something that is kind of like Creative Commons, and it's an issue for people who are trying to use photos, but they don't understand the difference between all these licenses. So what ends up happening is you lose those people. And what do? Well, a lot of them, because of what they've enabled with, they do what we did, where we hired Alejandro, but a year later, we just worked with our own designer, who's a hobbyist photographer, right, because a high-res camera is now built into his phone. Right. And that's what that's the alternate, right? So, and that's happening more and more and more. So we understand that there's people who are going to use these images who, when they could probably pay for a photographer and go through that process, but there's a huge chunk of other people who would not otherwise use these images, who would not otherwise see these photos if we didn't make it as clear. And it's way bigger than that percentage of companies who are using that.
Right, but do you see that it is just a continual erosion of what is already getting eroded? Like, it's already hard enough as it is. It's already hard enough to police our licensing, police our copyright. People take pictures off the internet, use them without permission, and we have to police that. And companies, companies that used to have good budgets, those budgets are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. There's fewer and fewer dollars to go work for, and there are now more and more sites like Unsplash popping up just saying, here you go, it's free, have at it. Mm-hmm. And none of us can compete for free.
I think there's a bunch of use cases that Unsplash is great for, where people wouldn't be hiring a photographer anyway. If I'm making a Google slide presentation or a keynote presentation, most people are just ripping those from Google anyway, Google Images, which is technically illegal. Right. And so what we're trying to do is, those are the main use cases that we're seeing, or people just personally using it on their device. And we're trying to build credit into every place. We're even trying to build tracking, like technical tracking, into the image without a watermark over it, so we can figure out where the images get used, so we can show off and actually connect that back, all those people, back
like
to
a blockchain kind of a thing?
Yeah, but not actually using the blockchain. Yeah, we're just actually building some technical things into the image.
So if you could build a blockchain, that would be amazing.
Yeah, these are some conversations we've been having about technically how to do it and what's the best way. But yeah, and the way we're thinking about revenue is involving our contributors. Like, I understand that's what we want to do. The behaviors are happening on the site. We have that responsibility anyway, and we haven't even monetized yet. So I think all of it, the way we look at the full picture, I understand it's going to evolve. I think there will always be a market for custom. Myself being an independent designer, even as things evolve, there's always that upper level that you're going to want something that's unique, and if a lot of people are using Unsplash, it's going to look very similar to certain things. So it's not going to cover, it will never cover all the use cases. And the whole point that with the licensing element and some of the posts that I wrote, even without Unsplash, you could kind of see that licensing just degrading, right? And how much you can make. And we saw that shift happen when there was sort of bigger, or you were independent, and then it sort of consolidated into MicroStock, and then Getty and Shutterstock sort of made those marketplaces, and it reduced the price of the photo per licensing. And that was racing to the bottom anyway. So to me, I'm looking at licensing, and we're looking at all the external conditions that are happening. It's not to say that photography is worthless. I think photography is one of the most impactful things that inspire people. Immediately, people can see an image and they feel whatever you felt. And I think that's really what we're trying to convey. And I get that there's some losses that happen in there, right? People are going to use these images that they should maybe be paying for, but there's a lot of people who are going to find out about your stuff. And as long as that chunk sits there that people are always going to be hiring, and I believe that people are going to continue hiring. We won't ever cover all the use cases, and then we're going to do something about it as well. So I see that is the future path to how this, and I don't believe that, visuals, whether it's still visuals with photography or moving visuals, they're the thing that have the biggest impact on people, and that's not going away.
Right. You talk about the eroding and the, stock prices and Getty and everyone, and a race to a bottom. And what it feels like is, hey, this glacier is melting. Let's just all get our hair dryers out and just blow it on down. The rainforest is getting cut down, so let's just go ahead and clear it. What I feel like, instead of, wow, look at how prices are eroding, what can we do to help stop that erosion? It's sites like Unsplash that just says, to hell with it. Let's just get rid of that, and we'll try to figure out what we can do when it all falls apart. We don't know what the solution is, so let's just be free, wide open. Anybody can do anything at all with these pictures, and then we'll figure it out. Once the rainforest is gone, then let's see what we have and what we can do. When I feel like some of us are standing up saying, hey, let's stop cutting this down. And I read your Wired interview, where you talk about, you don't make any money today. But there's an audience of creative professionals browsing high-quality work by other creative professionals. Makes connections inevitable. Like, I get that. And that's kind of the draw. That's why I sit here and go, well, shit, maybe I should get on Unsplash, because it's probably going to get in front of people I'm trying to market to anyways. Maybe a design agency is impressed with the work of a photographer. But basically, it talks about crew functioning as a matchmaking service. Today's free service becomes tomorrow's commercial platform. As Cho puts it, the photo is the loss leader. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the kind of the final thing. I'll wrap this up. I know your time is valuable, and
that's fine.
And I'll wrap it up. But photography is my life, man. I have a 19-year-old son who, despite me trying to talk him out of it, is trying to become a photographer too. Mm-hmm. And I have no clue what the industry is going to look like when he's my age.
Right.
When I've hung up my cameras and I've gone off to the dark room in the sky, I don't know what photography is going to look like at that point. And it doesn't look good. I want to say, son, this forest is getting cut down. It's diminishing. There's less and less of our ecosystem, and there's more stuff like this happening. You'll never be able to live off free, And then you say the photo is the loss leader. We're suddenly, what I create is the rotisserie chicken at the grocery store.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to clarify, what I mean by loss leader, because that can sound very harsh. But basically, what it means
sounds really harsh.
What it means is, the photo is in service of something, right? And right now, the photo it can be in service of money. It can be in service of creating relationships. And that's more of what it alludes to in my eyes. And it's less about, it really means, instead of trying to license the photo, there's another power that can come from the photo. And I could have said that in a different way, but that's essentially what I'm saying there, and that it relates back to the point about the connections between the people. A photo is a way to connect between people, and that's what we're seeing. And that's people want to use images because they connect with them. Yeah. And I get that. And to speak to your son's point, cutting down the forest, I look at it as more as we're burning fossil fuels, and that model, it's not sustainable, and it's not going to work. So we can look towards something else. We can look towards electric. Yes, it's going to be totally different. The model will be different. Yeah. And we have to figure that out. We don't know if the market is going to even accept everything or how it's going to work. But I'd rather be a part of that as someone who has been an independent creative, who's written my own stuff, who's had to make a living that way, than leave that up to someone who's just aggregating stuff across the internet, doesn't give a shit even about any crediting or whatever it is, because that's what was happening. There was already some sites that were up that were basically like the Pirate Bay, and they had no holds barred and didn't give a shit at all.
Right.
So I understand that this is a shift. It is another shift that's coming. I know we're accelerating it and we're part of it. But at the same time, I do believe there's a responsibility that we have that's attached to it.
Well, your energy metaphor is a good one, and I appreciate that. And that gives me, stuff to ponder on. I guess we can kind of wrap it up. I mean, we could go all day back and forth, and I'd rather not. We both have things to do in life. I feel from the photography side, from the industry side, is that number one, Unsplash is not doing enough to educate their photographers nor their users of the site. You can go to the site, even just from the thumbnail, click download. You don't have to agree to the terms and conditions. The user doesn't understand about model releases in many cases. The photographer doesn't understand about model releases in many cases. I reached out to an intellectual property lawyer. We spoke about this. They went through your site, looked at your license, and her advice is proceed with caution when dealing with Unsplash. An attorney representing an aggrieved party likely will sue the publisher, Unsplash, and the photographer to increase odds of recovering damages for these claims. Therefore, the free element of Unsplash may ultimately cost you more than when using a traditional license model. So what I would like to see Unsplash do, well, first you need to fix your FAQ page because it hasn't worked for 2 weeks. So underneath your license.
I think it might. We shifted over the site to a new blog, and there was a period where it was like disconnected from the link. Yeah. It's on the blog. It just wasn't connected properly.
Right.
So maybe now, but I'll double check that.
You really need to do a much better job educating your staff, educating photographers contributing, and educating the people using it. That just because it's on Unsplash does not mean that it can be used for any purpose. The license says it can be used for any purpose, but you are opening yourself to, and the photographers, I'm really worried about the photographers, because one bad lawsuit is going to send this house of cards crumbling. And some photographer out there is going to upload a picture thinking it's all good. It's some young designer who isn't quite as educated about model releases and all that is going to do some sort of large campaign for some sort of somebody, and that person in that photo is going to lawyer up, and everyone is going to have to fucking pay for it. And the photographer is going to be like, oh, I didn't know. And the designer will be like, oh, I didn't know. And Unsplash is going to be like, oh, nope, we indemnify ourselves from any of this. So education, I would love to see, I know that designers are a huge part of your user base, that designers come in and use a lot. I would love to see the designers giving back to the photographers. One person reached out to me and said, I reached out to a designer who had used a number of my photos in their work. He tagged me on IG and on Twitter as well. He loved my work and he thanked me for contributing because it helped his design work. Later, I was working on rebranding my website and reached out to him to see if he could possibly help me with some text treatments and maybe help me pick a color scheme. His reply, I'd love to help you. What is your budget? And he said, it was such a punch in the stomach. Like this designer used so much of my stuff and he loved it and he hit me up. And then as soon as I asked him for a little help, it was, how much can you pay me?
Right.
And what would be amazing, I as a photographer, I need templates for self-promotion and marketing materials and corporate ID packaging and stuff like that. Could you somehow facilitate something that the photography, you're getting a lot of stuff from contributing from the photography industry, with very little flowing back to the photography industry. And it would be great if it was a little more of a symbiotic kind of nature. Like we are photographers helping designers and designers helping photographers and other creatives adding in to the creative pie.
Yeah.
I am much more willing to be adding in if I know the users of my work are also adding in.
Right.
That feels more like contribution. That feels more like contributing to the whole, to where a rising tide can rise all ships.
Yeah.
So education, helping the photography industry, speaking with some very good lawyers about how you deal with your licensing. I mean, the cat is out of the bag. And I think my big fear, and I'll end it with this and anything else that you want to say kind of in closing, this is my big fear. You know the TV show Black Mirror?
Yeah.
Right? Kind of like today's Twilight Zone. My fear is that photographers are so into the numbers. My pictures have been downloaded millions of times. My pictures are seen more than pictures on the front page of the New York Times. My fear is that Unsplash comes out with a model of charging photographers for a premium profile on the site to give their stuff away for free. And that photographers would pay $10 a month in order for their stuff to be taken for free just so that they can have the numbers. Like I fear that could be a reality. Like that is the Black Mirror episode of the photo industry, where I'm paying you to give away my photos. Yeah,
that's not in our plans. The way that we have this,
thank God.
The way that we are thinking about this, I understand the contributions, that the contributors are making, and as you mentioned, it'd be great to see people on the other who are downloading the photos be giving back. A lot of the designers and other creative professionals, they take photography. They're not professional photographers, but that's part of them giving back. They actually do participate on the contributor side, so it's not just photographers. And there is many more cases. I know that's a case that's not great, right? Where someone feels that they gave something and they didn't get reciprocated back. But that's not all the cases. We have meetups, in different cities, and these connections become real. Some people there are contributors and some are downloaders, and that's part of the enhancing the connections. That was a lot of what we're trying to do this next year. Is all the people who are downloading and using the photos, like right now the site, you don't have to log in or do certain things. We're looking at how do we relate all those people back to each other, because then that relationship gets closer, becomes even more meaningful, and then it's more likely that something good arises from it. So we understand, and there's the supply and demand of what's happening and who's giving more and who's getting more. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the ecosystem functions really well, because if it doesn't, the whole thing is going to crumble anyway. Right. And it doesn't make sense.
Some of us are eating popcorn waiting for it to crumble.
It should. If we mess that up, then it should. And that's our responsibility to figure it out.
All right, man. Well, I have a studio here in Atlanta. I'm a big believer that, civil discussion needs to happen on these things. Like I said, I wouldn't cuss at you and pound the table, so I'm proud of myself that I haven't, because some of this I have paced the floor going, oh my God. But civil discussion, especially in this day and age, is how we all need to communicate. So if you're doing more meetups or get-togethers, I have a space in Atlanta. I will host an Unsplash whatever meetup in Atlanta, just to further the discussion. But man, this is my life, and it does feel threatening. And I know it's on me to adapt or die. The cat is out of the bag. But I'm going to go down at least trying to inform and trying to fight for my craft, to kind of speak up against what we do is not a loss leader. Thank you for kind of speaking more to that. But I know you're going to do what you're going to do, and I know it's changing. But I just appreciate your time. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate the transparency that you've put into your Medium posts. So, yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for, coming on and doing the call. And I appreciate also sort of your level of respect in these conversations. Because you're right. I've opened up to quite a few people and had it turn around and had words twisted and these sorts of things. And so yeah, I appreciate the objectivity and just like the rawness when you're coming in and telling me the stories in the background, because like that stuff's important to me. I'm from a creative background. That's all I know as well. The second I graduated school, I went into worked at an agency and became an independent designer.
Yeah. Well, very well, sir. I wish you a good day.
Yeah.
And we'll further the discussion. If there's ever any way that I can be a springboard, or if you have a question from, I wonder what a photographer would think about this. And you need to know, I will always be honest with you. And I really do appreciate you talking to me.
I appreciate it too.
All right. Well,
thanks.
Best of luck, and
thanks.
We'll see you later.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
How was it?
So that's the discussion that we had. I feel that Mikael definitely gave me some things to think about. I'm very close to being that old man just saying, "Get off my lawn." But I don't want to be closed-minded. I don't want to be a person who can't accept change and who can't look at a changing landscape and try to figure out what it means in the future going forward. Places like Unsplash, and I know there are other sites out there, I've found them and have looked at them, are not going away anytime soon. So they're here. What do we do about it? Many of you have already given me a lot of great food for thought, both pro and con, about services like Unsplash, about what that means for us as photographers. And I'm taking all of it to heart. I'm still digesting the food for thought that everyone has given to me. I've read every article and blog post that I can find. So that is the discussion. I wanted to begin this discussion with that discussion. And I will be back in a few days with my follow-up thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you later.
Noisy, quiet courtroom sat a young man old in years. A cheerful smile played on his face. His eyes were filled with tears. As in that crowd he sat alone while he stood up for trial. The judge was all attention. He was sleeping all the while. That poor boy was a rich cashier. His good friends, they were bad. The bank he worked for had no funds, and he stole every cent they had. When down the aisle that